Namaskar. Good evening. I am Indira. On behalf of Vidyadan, I welcome each and every one of you to this beautiful webinar on menstrual health and hygiene. This menstrual health is something that has been ignored or rather underrated in most parts of the world, or I would rather generalize it and say among the women community. Hence, today, as a part of our new initiative under the big umbrella of women empowerment, we have Dr. Kruthi Adidum, who is pursuing her MS in Gynecology and Obstetrics from Vaidehi Institute of Medical Sciences, Bangalore. And it is her personal mission to spread awareness about menstrual health, about the hygiene during the menstrual health, during the so-called period time, and help thereby the women in the mission of women empowerment. I would not like to introduce her much because words are going to just fail, and I'm just going to talk, and you all will be sleep, and sleep. So without much ado, I hand over the session to Kruthi ji. Kruthi ji, a very warm welcome. Please welcome to our session and welcome to Vidyadan. That's the first thing. Welcome to Vidyadan. We are very much indebted to you on bringing to the fore this big topic on menstrual health and hygiene, which has been largely ignored among the women community. Please, ma'am, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Mrs. Indira for such a thoughtful and very politely introducing me. So I'll also introduce myself. I'm Dr. Kruthi Adidum. I'm a very amateur gynecologist here trying to share my knowledge and also trying to know the doubts of a common man regarding menstrual health. I like the two words Mrs. Indira used today, very underrated and a broad bracket, a big umbrella of women empowerment. So it's definitely underrated. It's definitely not spoken enough. Even if it's spoken enough, I think we don't do justice for it. And secondly, thank you to the Vidyadan team. I mean, it's such a thoughtful name, Vidyadan. I think a very carefully curated name. And thank you to Mr. Prashant for today giving me this platform to share my knowledge. And thank you to my dear friend that, you can do this. So thank you very much. So let me start off by defining menstruation today. For any of you who don't know the term menstruation, it's basically the discharge of blood and some tissue products from a uterus lining through your vagina every month. So am I audible to everybody? Yes, thank you. So now experiencing menstruation could be different for different people. So personally for me, it's something that happens every month. It's a little painful. It happens, or when it happens, I'm like, oh, this month it's done. So I'm good to go now. So for some people, it's extremely painful. For some people, it's anxiety inducing. For some people, they dread having periods. So it's very subjective. So today I'm trying to lay out certain terminologies and certain things where, what symptom do you go to a doctor? Pain during periods, everybody has. Heavy flow could be a common symptom, but when do you go to a doctor with these symptoms is something I would like to share today as a doctor, from a doctor's perspective. And I would also like to talk about a little about menstrual hygiene. So this May 28th, I think it was Menstrual Hygiene Day. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And what a paradox. The theme was make menstruation a normal fact of life. I mean, it has been a normal fact of life since the human race has existed. But since in this day and age in 2022 also, we have to keep a caption saying make it a normal fact of life. So that's how underrated, underspoken, and unjustified menstruation is. So today, let's make an effort to justify and normalize and destigmatize menstruation in this webinar. So I hope I have a support from all of you. So starting with a few of the menstrual problems, I would start off with something called dysmenorrhea. Dysmenorrhea is something that is defined as painful periods. Everybody has pain during periods, am I right? From day 1 or day 2, but there could be many causes of it. Causes could be primary or secondary. Primary is something that your body owns, which you can't change, like your age, your inheritance, your body type, and certain things. But secondary is something which you have acquired, which you can change, which is modifiable. So the primary causes could be your BMI, your body mass index, and your certain body type, and your stress factors, and your certain problems, mental health problems like depression and anxiety, and your family history of periods, your mother, your grandmother, or anybody could be having a heavy periods, and you have unfortunately taken after them to have painful periods or something like that. And secondary causes could be like you have acquired an infection from somewhere, you have an intrauterine device which is called a Kruthi, from which you have Kruthi is a very infamous for causing heavy menstrual bleeding and like painful periods. So it's very common in the rural part of India to use Kruthi for contraception. So which is again a problem with compliance, is that it causes painful periods. So that's how, are you understanding how contraception and your dysmenorrhea and heavy bleeding are correlated? People go for contraception, get a Kruthi done, but they have a heavy menstrual bleeding, get it removed for it, have a dysmenorrhea, painful periods because of it, get it removed, and they want it, and an unwanted pregnancy happens. So that's how your cycle of periods is interlinked. So all these, and one of the major causes where you have to go to a doctor for painful periods is something called endometriosis, where your uterine lining has infiltrated into your other parts of the uterus, your vagina, your ovaries, where it's normally not situated. Okay, so it causes a lot of painful periods, and this is the time you have to get your scans done. You should get your prescription, and your it needs a lot of intervention. And very leading cause of painful periods is fibroids. Fibroids are the masses in your uterus which causes painful periods, and ovarian cysts. So when you go to a doctor when there is painful is when it's disabling your life, when it's the term is exclusion, where you don't go to workplaces, where you don't go to your family functions, where you don't go to, you don't wake up and have your own breakfast. You can't make your own breakfast. That's when dysmenorrhea is a problem, and you have to consult your doctor. It could be endometriosis, you could be having premature fibroids, you could be having your ovarian cysts, you never know. So that's when you contact your doctor. The other terminal, I hope I'm not boring anybody. And other factors, terminologies of medical is menorrhagia. Menorrhagia is heavy bleeding. Heavy bleeding is defined as when you bleed for more than 8 days and you're changing pads every 2 hours. And when you are waking up in the middle of the night to change your pads, and you are double protecting yourself with 2 or 3 pads so that your clothes are not stained, your undergarments are not stained, or you're restricting your daily activities, and you pass huge clots during all these days. So these are problematic, and one of the leading causes of heavy menstrual bleeding is obesity, which is a global pandemic right now. That is obesity. I'll explain how obesity causes heavy menstrual bleeding is fat cells in your extremities, in your body, tend to produce estrogen. So estrogen is what forms the lining of the uterus, which has to be shed during the menstruation. So more the fat cell in the body, the more the estrogen is produced, and the more there's a lining of your uterus, and the more you shed it. So that's how obesity works. And I hope we deal with this global pandemic of obesity at some time. And again, fibroids. And in women, we are very, very prone to hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism is something where your thyroid gland placed here is dysfunctional, and you produce less amount of thyroid hormones, and which eventually regulates your hormone cycle, and you don't bleed well or you bleed excessively. So that's one. Whenever you're bleeding excessively or less for that matter, you should always have your thyroid profile checked. That is T3, T4, and thyroid stimulating hormone. And again, copper T is very infamous for this. So anybody you know in the rural areas or anywhere who's getting a copper T done should be counseled for dysmenorrhea and menorrhagia symptoms while they're trying for contraceptives. One more problematic issue in menstruation for some girls is irregular cycles. Irregular cycles is at some point where you're bleeding every 35 days, but the normal cycle is around 28 to 30 days, but your bleeding cycles are more than 35 days or 2-3 months like that. So common factors where, irregular periods is normal is when you're just hitting puberty, when you've just started bleeding. So young girls have to be counseled, telling that, for the first 1 year where you've started for periods, started into, menstruating, having irregular cycles is very common. There's nothing to fear. And at the time of childbirth and while you're feeding your child, lactating, that's called lactation period, it's a very natural method of contraception. At the same time, you'll have regular periods, very irregular periods, I mean. And during the perimenopausal phase, that is 47 years to 55 years, where women, I hope everybody knows the term menopause, where, women stop menstruating. So at that time, if you have irregular cycles every 2 months, every 3 months, every 6 months, it's pretty normal. So you'll have hot flushes, you'll have mood swings, and you'll have irregular periods. So these are the only times where irregular periods are normal. Other times where irregular periods are abnormal, our leading cause for this is stress. I mean, if I have to work in a hospital and I have to see 100 patients a day, and I have to run around a lot, and I have a physical work a lot, I'm sure to miss my that month's periods. That's for sure. And that's very mentally daunting sometimes. So stress, sudden weight gain and weight loss, which is indirectly related to your thyroid profiles, diabetes, and let's welcome the demon of the new times, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I think every girl now who gets scanned will have a sonological report saying bilateral ovarian cyst, PCOS. So I think this is the new demon that all girls are tackling. So it's related to lifestyle. It's related to very basic factors more often than not, like what you eat, how you sleep, how you conduct your life. So all these and infections again are a leading cause for irregular cycles, where, genitourinary tuberculosis or unhealthy sexual practices. All these can cause a lot of infection. All these can cause a lot of irregular cycles. So, and I would mostly talk about today is premenstrual syndrome. I suffer from premenstrual syndrome a lot. More often than not, people tend to, brush it off by saying, oh, this girl is hormonal. This girl is very moody today. I mean, I hear that every month. I'm sure every girl has heard this at some point of time. So I think we should dignify premenstrual syndrome a little, where, it's a combination of physical and emotional symptoms where, you're bloated, you have headache, you have tender breasts. And personally, I am bloated. I have tender breasts. I cannot sleep on my stomach because it pains. And, so there's no shyness in talking all this because these are practical problems. And emotionally, crying spells and food craving. And boy, talk about food craving. I'm one of those. So all these are a part of premenstrual syndrome. And premenstrual syndrome is a very good factor for you to go and talk to your gynecologist or a psychiatrist. Premenstrual syndrome could be a very good cause for not excelling in your work life or not being cautious in your day-to-day life. And I hope I'm stressing enough about this because it is actually a problem, and not many girls are aware of this, and not many rectify it. So premenstrual syndrome is one of these things. And ill habits like smoking, stress, and if there's a family history of depression, and if there is history of what do we say, postpartum depression. I don't know how many of you have heard it. It's a depression that you go through just after delivering your baby. So it's a very common thing. It's a very it's seen in everybody. Let me just say that. Let me just generalize it. It's seen in every woman, or it's called a subtle way of saying it is postpartum blues. Okay, so but when you are hit by a major depressive episode after postpartum, you could continue to have premenstrual syndrome, and you could pass down an inheritance. So premenstrual syndrome is something we should all now talk about and normalize it. And today, as a gynecologist, specifically today, I would like to concentrate on something called intermenstrual bleeding. This is a concept not many know. This is a concept not every common man knows. Intermenstrual bleeding is when you have spotting or a day or two of bleeding between your two cycles. Like imagine April 24th was your cycle and next May 24th was your cycle, but in between you have bled for 2 days. What is this bleeding? Where is it coming from? It's called, medical terminology of this is metrorrhagia. You should be concerned about this unless and until if you are on oral contraceptive pills, there could be breakthrough bleeding because of your estrogen in your tablets. It could be because of stress. It could be because of your vaginal draining, because it is not dryness, because it does not have enough, estrogen. But it could also be, more often than not, subtle indicator of a cervical cancer. This is how cervical cancers start, and this is how we miss it, and we detect it in the later stages. But this could be a subtle indicator of cervical cancer, and anybody post-menopausally is bleeding could also be a subtle indicator of cervical cancer. So how do we go about this? When you have intermenstrual bleeding, kindly consult your OGYN, your obstetric and gynecologist, and ask for something called pap smear. Even before you ask it, a gynecologist will suggest something called a pap smear. A pap smear is a test where there's a brush. We brush out the cells around your cervix. We take a brush. This is the cervix. We brush it around. And it's a simple outpatient procedure. It's very economical, around 300 rupees in a private setup. And we send it for testing. What is what kind of cells are there or what? It has to be done every 3 years from the age of 21, from the age of 20, till the age of 65. Once your sexual activity starts, you should be ideally getting it done. Like how you go to a master health checkup to just get your BP done. That's how common it is. So when you go for your master health checkup, please advise your sisters, mothers, mother-in-laws, or anybody to go get their pap smear done. Cervical cancer is very preventable. One of the most, I wouldn't say easily treated, but I would say that, easily prevented. So always suggest your near and kin ones to go get a pap smear done. So when you get your pap smear done, you shouldn't be sexually active. You shouldn't be applying any gels into your vagina, and you should not get it done when you're on periods or you have a lot of white discharge per vagina. So this is how you go about your intermenstrual bleeding. I hope I'm clear. Okay. Now, coming to something called menstrual hygiene. Menstrual hygiene is something which is very important and should be taught to adolescent girls from the age of 10 to 19, mostly, because that's when people face a lot of stigma, a lot of shame, and a lot of stress. I remember my mother sitting me down one day when I was in 6th standard. That was in 2006. I suddenly feel old when I say I was in 6th in 2006. But so I remember my mother sitting me down and telling me that, at one point you'll start menstruating, you'll have your periods. But I don't know why, but I felt a lot of hey, I know all this, you don't tell me. I felt a lot of shame or stigma discussing it even with my own mother. But thankfully, my mother was very open-minded, and she told me that there's nothing wrong about it. You should be talking about it. So that's how we normalize menstrual hygiene, just by talking about it. So things to ensure when menstrual hygiene is firstly, basic is knowledge and awareness for the young girls of why there should be menstrual hygiene. What is the need to maintain a menstrual hygiene? Without knowledge and awareness, how many ever sanitary pads you give, how many ever tampons you give, how many ever menstrual cups you give, they don't know how to use it, they don't know how to dispose it, they don't know how to maintain it clean. There's no point of it. So I think knowledge and awareness is something very basic. And second is separate washroom and clean water supply. I think every girl, when we are traveling in a bus or a car, the first thing we fear is, will there be a washroom? Will I have a place to change my pad? Personally, I mean, show of hands for all the girls who have experienced this. I mean, I always dread this. So even when I go to the hospital every day, I just hope I don't have to use the washroom. I don't drink enough water because I don't have to use the washroom. So these are very practical problems. Imagine in urban cities staying like this and we face the problems, and rural cities, my God, I can only imagine what is the situation. So in the UNICEF guidelines, actually, there's a specific line which is written saying, just by ensuring separate washroom doesn't ensure menstrual hygiene. That's such a thoughtful statement, actually. You give them a separate washroom, but you don't know what to tell. You don't teach the girls what to do inside that washroom. I mean, you don't tell them or guide them how to use a menstrual cup and dispose it after how many hours. There's no point of that separate washroom. So a sanitary place, a good separate washroom, a clean water supply to ensure menstrual hygiene is the second most important thing apart from knowledge. And the third point is a good supply of high quality menstrual pads. Menstrual cups, tampons have come out now, but menstrual pads is something we should tell a woman, how dangerous using a cloth is, and supply them with good amount of good quality pads, which are economical. Economy is one of the major reasons why women don't use pads. So it's quite costly. So for whether we like it or not, with a lot of tax associated with it and stuff, but good, so high quality sanitary pad supply. So 3 things to ensure menstrual hygiene: a sanitary pad supply, good clean water, and the separate washroom for girls. And most importantly, the most important is knowledge and awareness for the adolescent girls about the why power of menstrual hygiene. Why are we asking them to maintain it? And menstrual hygiene is also a scheme under Swachh Bharat mission. I don't know how many of you know it, but it's a part of Swachh Bharat mission. So it's not very widely advertised, but it is. And it's the same. The protocol under it is same, which is like increasing awareness in adolescent girls, increase in access to high quality. These are the exact lines from the ministerial, what I'm reading out. Increase in access to use of high quality sanitary napkins, and to ensure safe disposal in an environment friendly manner. And these are the guidelines under the Swachh Bharat mission of menstrual health and hygiene scheme. So how do we promote menstrual hygiene and how do we destigmatize it is the question and the need of the hour. I think from the age of adolescent girls, from age of 10 to 19 should be taught. And I would like to narrate an incident where in my 7th standard, girls were asked to move into another class. And we were taken a class about menstrual hygiene and, how to communicate with each other about our pads and menstrual hygiene and menstrual cycles and everything. And only women teachers telling us and everything. Retrospectively, I think, why were the boys excluded out of it? It's the biggest question. And that's why, men shy away from taking responsibility of this. Actually, the responsibility lies on them of destigmatizing it, and how we speak in a hush-hush manner when there are a lot of men that, when how we smuggle out our pads into our pockets and everything. Even in a hospital scenario where there are male doctors also, I smuggle my pads out. So that's how stigmatized it is. And let's face it. So it's very important to teach the other gender that, you know, the responsibility lies on them also to destigmatize it. Where they sit down at home, the charity starts at home. So where they teach their sons, their daughters, their husbands, their brothers, and everybody that, you know, this is a very normal phenomenon. And they need to be taught when the girls have to be taken to the hospital, when the girls have to be taken care of, at what point of periods, at what symptom is it dangerous. So all these have to be taught to the other gender also. And menstrual hygiene also comes under the bracket of very heinous practice called menstrual segregation. So there is a area in Maharashtra called Gadchiroli where they practice menstrual segregation very, very strictly, where they have dirty little huts for women out there who menstruate, and they have to sit in that huts for 5 days and experience absolute hell and come back after they've stopped menstruating. I mean, how do we maintain hygiene? How do we maintain health? And how do we maintain dignity of that woman when you are separating them and we don't provide them with basic necessities like pads and washrooms and water? So I think this is one of the bigger, I mean, we have practiced at home. I'm sure all of our grandmothers have told us not to enter kitchen, have asked us told not to pray, asked us not to touch certain things when we are menstruating. We have entwined culture and menstruation a lot. And I think my personal opinion, this has to stop. And it is a very personal opinion. I'm sure everybody differs, but I think so. Menstrual segregation is also one of the factors where menstrual hygiene is not ensured. So today, I would like to tell that, you know, there are 3 ways in which you can use your, you know, sanitary supply is menstrual pad, tampons, and menstrual cup. These 3. So menstrual pad, I'm sure everybody uses it. So you make sure you change every 6 hours. And when there is foul smell and when there is a lot of bleeding, you change it. Menstrual cup, there are different sizes for menstrual cup, for different sizes of the vagina. You choose accordingly and drain your blood every 4 hours so that you're not infected. And there are tampons in which it's small, this size with a thread around where you can insert it and pull it around at your convenience. And tampons, according to me, as a doctor, I would suggest you change every 2 to 3 hours because it's associated with something called toxic shock syndrome, where, you know, the absorbing power of a tampon is very questionable, but a menstrual cup is quite good, unless and until you have a rather abnormal bleeding. But I think I would suggest menstrual cups and pads for a normal flow and normal period. So if you have any doubts regarding all this, please feel free to ask me.
Okay, I presume that's a no. Nobody's asking anything. But in a way, you explained a lot of things in a very simple, lucid manner.
Yeah.
You clarified a lot of things. Like there were some things which I had some questions on, and I was actually planning to ask you, but then you already covered it in your lecture. So it was very simply explained in a very lucid manner. Anybody, any doubts? Yes, Athena, please go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. So the thing is, like, is it possible to have, is it normal to have cramps? Like when you initially you don't have cramps, like in the earlier stages, but you start getting it in your 20s. Is it normal to happen? Is that thing?
Okay. Hi, Athena. So that's a very good question. So when you start off with your periods, that is called menarche, you have something called anovulatory cycles, where your ovum is not produced, but you have your periods. Okay, that's the scientific part of it. So when you have something called anovulatory cycles, you don't tend to have a pain. Okay, but as you progress with your periods, as the age increases, your anovulatory cycles decrease and your ovulatory cycles increase. I'm sure I'm making sense to you that, ovum is produced. So when your ovum is produced and it's associated with menstruation, that's when your cramping and, everything starts. So I think initially having no cramps and no pain, and then starting off with pain and something called dysmenorrhea is absolutely okay. That's what I said. Unless and until it's not excluding you from your the criteria of exclusion that I spoke about. It's not excluding you from your day-to-day activities and stuff. I think you're fine. It's pretty normal to have that.
Also, ma'am, I wanted to ask about this thing called ovulation pain. Is that also normal in the middle of ovulation pain? Like
yes, in the middle of this, yes, that's a very good question. You're very well informed, actually. So it's nice to know that whenever you're ovulating, it's called mid-pain cycle. That I hope everybody knows how a menstrual cycle works. For the first 14 days of your cycle, your uterus is prepared for the ovum that's supposed to get fertilized. But when it's not fertilized, your uterus lining is shed and it's come down. So for the first 14 days, when your uterus is getting prepared for that ovum downstairs, and then the ovum is coming, and that's when the pain is coinciding with your ovum release. I think that's very common and that's very normal. It's very sad to say that pain is very normal, but that's how it is.
So there was one interesting thank you, Athena. There was one very interesting thing. Not exactly interesting, but rather I would call it humorous. One of my uncles, what he did, me and my cousin, we both were having pain. Okay, we were undergoing the menstrual cycle, and we both were in pain, and both of us always keep running around, and we are the most mischievous of the entire lot. But one particular day, we were like this. So our uncle asked us, "What happened? What's wrong with you?" He said, "Like our stomach is paining, blah 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 blah." So he said, "Okay, do one thing, just bite your own tongue. It will be so painful, you'll forget your stomach ache." Okay, on a serious note, I would like to know that as you grow old, or rather after your post 35 and all, as you keep growing old, does the flow increase with the age? So that is something I would like to know.
Not necessarily, but it could happen, but it's there's no dictum as such that it has to increase. So it could be because of many other factors. If a person is on any contraceptive pills, or any associated with any ascending infection or something like that, but there is no dictum that it has to increase, but it could increase. Unless and until it is not, there is no much heavy menstrual bleeding, or there's not a lot of soakage, or there's a lot of discomfort and foul smell and everything, I don't think it should be a problem. So there is no dictum as such that it cannot increase or it could increase, but it could increase is the right way to put it, I think. It could also be associated with a little age-related fibroids and everything. So a little intervention to exclude all such things could also help for, mentally not worrying that, why the periods have been increasing.
Okay, fine. All right. Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody? No? Yes, Harshita, please go ahead. Harshita and then Christy. Okay.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, are you to have more white discharge when your periods is nearing? Or
yes.
Is it also normal to have them on other days as well?
See, it's normal to have a little amount of white discharge throughout the month. But just before you start your periods is also is also very normal. This is a very prominent complaint that we as gynecologists face, that, patient come with complaints of, I have a lot of white discharge and, please treat me and stuff. But all we tell is, just before you're menstruating, having a little amount of, wetting or a little amount of white discharge and little amount of, it could be associated with a little amount of foul smell, unfortunately. All this is normal. But post menstruation also, if it continues and you have to use a pad or a liner or something like that to avoid the uncomfortable wetness or something, that's when it's problematic. But because of your hormonal changes, because of your uterine wall changes and everything, having white discharge just 1 week prior your period date is very normal.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, Kruthi, go ahead. Thank you, Harshita.
Thank you.
Okay, actually, this is an open question to everyone. So, ma'am, earlier you narrated a story of how you were segregated into male, female students, and you were given a separate class for female students. So, I think it's in 8th grade that you're taught these lessons in biology, right? So, till my 9th grade, I studied in a boys only school. So I don't know if this practice still exists where girls are given a separate class. So I wanted to know if this still exists, and if it does, is there a way to stop it? Because it's not ideal practice exactly, right?
Definitely not ideal. And Kruthi, if it's, I have to become younger by the day to go back to school and check if it's still happening. I wish I could do that. But I think it still does, because my cousins who are younger keep having these stories of, and sex education and all is still not common in every school. So I think the same lies with these. But I think the change is happening, but it's not very evident. I think we have to work towards it.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kruthi, for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Adding to what Dr. Kruthi has just shared, this has to start from gender equality. Okay. And this particular non-segregation and integration of all the children, irrespective of whether they are boys or girls, it has to start from the kindergarten. I'll give you a very small personal example. My son is in 2nd standard. He has a copywriting book. Okay, English copywriting. For every weekend, they have to write. In the English copywriting book, there is a sentence. It's just 1 page, so half page for one sentence, half page for the next sentence. The first sentence in that book is, my mother cooks food for me. In the second half, the sentence is, my father earns money for me. This small thing, it is a very small thing, but the practice has to happen right from the smaller age. We have to stop segregating right then and there in these small little places itself. We cannot have a lot of, then, when you go to the higher classes, integrating them, bringing them together and explaining, it's much easier.
And I'm so thankful, Miss Indra, that you brought up this. I mean, I thought I would go off topic when I bring up this, but segregating gender roles is such a very 1940 thing to do, if I am sounding millennial. So it's something not cool. It's something not, which has to be, the mindset of a child when he or she is growing up is so important. When you're taught that in the childhood, they grow up thinking that, this gender does this gender is meant to do this, anything otherwise is against the nature. That's what the children start believing in, and that's so unfortunate. And changing their mindset after a certain point, whether it's women or men, is so tough. that, and that's what goes on for the next generation also. They start dividing gender roles, and they start dividing course with the gender, linking the course and the gender. That's very unfortunate. And that's how I think menstruation has also been like, men think it's not their responsibility at all. No offense to any any man here, but I'm just telling that, it has been like that. At least maybe not this generation, like previous generation, they think it's not their responsibility, it's not their काम कि ladies का problem है, ladies और note करते रहे. But I think men have a larger responsibility. At least when you become fathers, sit down and teach your sons and daughters equally that, menstruation is something very normal. And that's bigger bracket is charity starts at home. And it starts with basic things like this, like, when you teach your son what is menstruation, and, how to help out a girl, how to, safeguard make a girl feel safe during menstruation when she's in the public or something. And how not to make children right. My mom cooks for me. So I think the charity starts at home.
Yeah, so there's another interesting thing that I came across. How many of you are aware of Toto-chan? Have you all heard of Toto-chan? Okay. Now, Toto-chan is it's a beautiful book on, and it is the story of a small girl who was very restless. Okay, as a kindergartner, she was very restless, and she was actually dismissed from 3 schools before she finally went and joined a 4th school. Okay, and this school was a school in train. Okay, and this has happened just before the Second World War. So what the headmaster did was, all the unused or the discarded old train compartments, he would request the railway authorities to donate it to him so that he could run a school in his ghar ka ground. Okay. And so there they have a big swimming pool. So up to the end, the school was running only for children up to the age of 10. So all the children once a week, they all will jump into the swimming pool. Fully nangu pangus. Not a single cloth, not even the undergarments, nothing will be there. Everybody has to jump into the pool. And the thought behind that was such a beautiful thought that the headmaster had. He said, everyone have their own differences. I want all the children to know the difference, physically see the difference, accept it then and there. Only then we can have an integrated community going forward. Toto-chan, although at that time she was suspended and she had to attend 4 or 5 different schools. Today she's now pretty old, but yes, she's one of the well-known Japanese actors. But yes, what started in her school as an act of integration or gender inclusion, not just gender inclusion, even inclusion of education, it became quite successful in Japan. And later, in the post-World War years, they started trying to imbibe that into their own schools. So this is one of the, I keep referring to Toto-chan book because I'm myself a teacher. So, but yes, these are some of the small acts that we all can do even at our own home. And one point which you had raised, and I'm very thankful to you about, Kruthi ma'am, is menstrual hygiene and disposing the pads. Unfortunately, in many, many places, at least for metros, it is okay. We have facilities to dispose. And there are, garbage collection, people who come and, who take away and they incinerate it. But there are many places, I can tell you for sure out of personal experience in Kerala, we cannot dispose the landfills, whether it be sanitary pads or, it be diapers, anything. Landfills, we cannot dispose. The only thing we can do is to just burn them.
Yeah.
It becomes quite difficult.
Yes.
So that is another place where there has to be a lot of awareness. not just among the citizens, us as citizens, but also with the government. They also have to take some initiatives in the
Yes.
disposal system, right? Would you like to add something more on that? Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
actually, disposal is a problem in every setup actually. So there has to be a careful disposal of menstrual waste, like pads or blood from the menstrual cup and everything. There are quite a few government schemes about it where I should also read up about. But I think when you are disposing menstrual pad or anything, you should make sure that you don't flush it down or anything. You carefully wrap it around in a paper and put it in a separate bin into a dry waste. And the menstrual blood which you are disposing from the menstrual cup has to be disposed into the into the toilet system. Flushing it down without pouring it anywhere outside can cause infections and stuff. So I think disposal and menstrual, there's a study about actually menstrual waste and the infections caused to the rack pickers. And it's a very blood is a good culture for organisms to grow. So there's a publication about how menstrual blood is a cause for spread of certain infections into rack pickers, which eventually will go on to become a community infection. So I think disposing menstrual waste is also a good topic where there could be another session about how it is a cause of infection.
Yeah, and we need to have a proper facilities. Like
Yes.
there was some village, I'm failing to recollect the name. It's in Bengal. Like when I was doing my research in Bengal, at that time I had come across this particular village. They had at that was way back in 2006 or 7. Yeah, it was around 2006 or 7. So they had incinerators at certain points in the village. There were around, I think there were 3 incinerators, if I'm not wrong. And the ladies, they can dispose their pads in the incinerator, and in the morning they switch on the incinerator and make it functional. Or I think it was once in every alternate day or something like that. I'm forgetting the details, but yeah, they had incinerators at certain points wherein ladies can dispose their pads. So some such system has to
Yeah.
be introduced.
Yeah, incinerators. Incinerators are far away thing, but I think the first basic thing that we have to do is every building or every community should have a separate waste disposal dustbin or area where you only dispose. Like in my hostel or anywhere, we have a separate bin only for menstrual waste. That's actually very thoughtful. That also gives awareness to people who are picking up the waste, and who know that this is menstrual waste and know what to do with it. So segregating menstrual waste is the initial part of it. I think that's where we can start off with, if not anything else.
Right. Okay, so this is becoming a quite interesting discussion, by the way.
Yeah.
No, because this disposing like pads to फिर भी मिल जाते हैं, but फेंके कहाँ? That is like
It's
a
a problem.
very serious threatening issue.
Yes.
Like when we were living in, I mean, out of personal experience, I'm saying, when we were living in Pune, we had people who were coming and there were separate disposal or dustbins for that, and they would take it separately. When we came to Kerala, that became like a big issue. Arey baap re, ab main iska kya karu? How do I do? And my family members, oh, you just burn it. I'm like, what? How? That was like
That
a very
itself is
culture
a
shock to me.
time-consuming thing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then now in Bangalore again, yes, they are taking it off. We are segregating it and they're taking it off. But I'm not quite sure how much this installation and everything is working. So probably we can just, do some bit of research on that.
Interestingly, now there are companies who are marketing pads with a nice fancy cover. It's heavy on the pocket and burns your pocket for sure. But then it has a nice envelope where, you know, if you're traveling, I use it personally when I'm traveling, or, you know, I have to, I travel long or anything. There's a nice disposal cover in which they give, and you dispose it off. You can store it in your, if there is no dustbin around, like, you know, you're traveling in a bus and there's no dustbin and you can't throw it around in the woods because you're a responsible citizen. So you put it in that disposal bag, which covers the odor, doesn't spread, or, you know, doesn't stain around your bag or anything, and put it in that black cover, which comes with the pad, and you dispose it when you come home. I think that's very thoughtful, yet a very good marketing thing, but I think that's a very thoughtful thing.
Yeah, I like that term, a responsible citizen. I met
Yeah.
your doctor. So that was the first thing that she told me the moment I met Dr. Kruthi during the session. Like, I am an amateur gynecologist. I'm still doing my MS in gynecology and all. But considering the amount of knowledge, the amount of information you have shared with us, I think nobody can say you're amateur.
You're just being modest, I think.
1 minute, ma'am. Somebody named iPhone, please mute. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. But yes, this was very informative, very useful, and it was a beautiful session. Any questions, anybody? Athena, Harshita, Shalini, Christy, Aparna.
Yes, ma'am. I have one question. That is, am I audible?
Yes, yes, please.
So, ma'am, this is from my personal experience that I'm asking you. After my periods are over, after about a week's time, sometimes it so happens again start bleeding. I don't know why. For a day or two, it again happens, and I again start bleeding, and that kind of weakens my body, and again that mood swings and everything comes along with that. The entire package comes along with that. So, can you please tell me why is it so?
So after your periods, you bleed for about 4 to 5 days?
No, ma'am, it's just for a day or two.
No. After your regular cycles of periods, and then you bleed for a day or two,
Yeah,
is it?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So is it a heavy bleeding, or is it just a normal amount of bleeding?
Normal, ma'am, not heavy bleeding or something.
Normal amount of bleeding.
Normal,
Okay. Yeah. Can I ask your age? Is it fine?
22 years, ma'am.
22 years. I wish I was so young, but then yeah. Shalini, I think it's normal. So between your normal cycles and this episode of 1 to 2 days of bleeding, can you tell me how much gap is there? Like how many days?
For about a week or so, ma'am. 4 to 5 days or a week.
Okay, so 4 to 5 days. I think it's normal. It's because of something called a breakthrough bleeding or something like that. Are you on any tablets or any medication or
No,
anything
ma'am.
like that?
I'm not
Nothing.
talking.
Okay. So I think at that age where your ovulatory cycles are getting synced in, I think it's normal. But if it continues, I think you should consult a doctor for any PCOS or any such thing. But it's nothing abnormal.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Shalini, for asking the question, and thank you, Dr. Kruthi, for answering each and every doubt and each and every what do you call it as? I'm not getting the right term, but yes, thank you for clearing each and every stigma that might be there, or some of the issues, some of the problems that we commonly face. Thank you for clarifying that and
My duty
helping
as a
us
doctor.
realize. It is very easy to say that it's the duty of a doctor, but unfortunately, there are very few people who actually come to the fore and say, hey, no, this is the thing, don't worry, it's normal, it's a part of life. Right. So it was quite sweet, and it was very nice of you to do this. And we really, at least all of us here, we all enjoyed, and I would not say enjoyed, we all found this quite informative.
Thank you very
and
much.
put in a lot of our stress at ease. You helped us
I hope
put
so.
our
I hope
stresses
so.
and tensions at ease. At least personally, I have a lot of anxiety related to my menstrual cycle and all. Then I'm like, why is this happening?
Very
But
common.
then yes, that's quite common. Yeah. But yes, we have to go through it.
Yeah.
But thanks for putting all of us at ease, and thanks for raising some of the issues, pointing out at some specific things that need to be taken into consideration or that need to be figured out. We have to be careful about. And it was really nice of you. All of us loved this session a lot.
Thank you.
We
Thank you
look
very
forward
much.
to getting associated with you and working on this, spreading more awareness.
Thank you very much. It has been my honor that I've been provided with such a platform, and it's my initial stepping to a larger purpose for women empowerment and to serve the women out there in the society. So can I just have 2 minutes to say that
Please.
we'll bust 3 myths today, saying that women are impure. The word is impure. The women are impure during menstruation. I urge all of you to stop using that word right now, today, where, we entwine a lot of culture and, menstruation and practices and menstrual segregation. I personally worked very hard to stop this at my house, where, today you've started, don't get into the kitchen today. That is the day I got into the kitchen. So I'm very rebellious. No wonder people hate me at my house. But then, so that has to stop. There is no scientific purpose to it. So I hope we all make sure we strive towards banishing menstrual segregation. And the myth that exercising is bad during menstruation. Now, you can just taper your exercise down while you're bleeding, while you're menstruation, but exercising is never bad during, before or after menstruation. It only helps regularizing your cycle, regularizing your flow or anything. And the fact that PMS is not a thing. Anybody in my PMS tells that, you're just hormonal, you're just doing it because you're in a bad mood, just because you are menstruating, is something I cannot tolerate. PMS is a very genuine medical issue where, that has to be taken care of. Like how you take care of your headache. If you have a headache continuously, you would take a tablet. You would want to sleep well. You would want to avoid your screen time. You would want to, shut down a little social interaction and stay in peace. So that's how PMS is. It has to be treated like just any other headache, stomach ache, eye ache, hand ache, or any other ache. So these are the 3 myths: menstrual segregation, exercising during your menses, and that premenstrual syndrome is actually a medical problem. You have to deal with it. These are the 3 myths that, we have to deal with it today. So take home message today is that, that please stop menstrual segregation. It's not okay.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, exercising, you can definitely do that. I'm myself a Jita Jata example because I'm a dancer. So even during when I used to perform, during my menstrual cycle also, because performance does not come with choice, right? They don't give you an option. So I never had a choice. Yes, we have to adjust ourselves. We have to, conform to a lot of things, but that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, that's very relatable actually. If I'm half as good as you, I can tell I am also a dancer, a trained Bharatanatyam dancer. So I understand that, that when you're on stage, it doesn't matter if you're bleeding or not. And for that matter, actually, when you're performing a Bharatanatyam, when it's actually a very cultural performance, you don't see before doing a namaskaram that, you're bleeding or not. You are just performing. So when there is no menstrual segregation there, in otherwise also there shouldn't be. I have never been on stage thinking today I'm menstruating, so I'm not going to do my namaskaram today. I'm just going to start performing. I have never done that.
No,
so I think, yeah.
So we are in the same boat.
Yeah, good to know.
Okay, fine. So, thank you everyone for being a very nice, attentive audience
Yes.
on this sensitive issue of, or rather, sensitive yet tabooed issue of menstrual hygiene. And I thank each and every one of you for being an interactive participant rather than being a dumb listener. Thank you so much, all of you. And thank you, Dr. Kruthi, for those words of wisdom and busting those 3 myths. That's a huge takeaway for each and every one of us. Thank you, all of you.